Hello and welcome to the Scatterworld channel, and today I want to show you the top 5 best definitive 1080p budget gaming graphics cards you can buy for the summer of 2019. So in today's video guide, I'm going to be covering the 5 most popular graphics cards you can buy both brand new and used for under $250, more specifically from the price range of $120 all the way up to $220, so about a $100 price range, which I think is pretty fair. And the graphics cards we're going to be covering that are in that price range are the RX 580, RX 570, GTX 1660, GTX 1650, and the GTX 1060. And from these top 5 cards, I will be deciding for you guys at the end of the video which one I think would be the best if you're going to get a new graphics card or a used one, say on eBay. So what I haven't seen many other graphics card review / comparison videos do is actually test games that I think would be relevant, because many of those videos just have games that have really convenient built-in benchmarking tools, which are great, but they don't include games like Fortnite and CSGO, which luckily I was able to do in I think a really clever way, which I'll talk about later. But on top of that, they also don't go into the value analysis of each of the cards. So what I've done is calculate the frames per dollar on each of these cards, and on top of the performance, go into the value and see which of these cards is giving you the most frames per dollar, and actually see which one, like I said, has the best value. So more or less, I want this video to give you guys the most well-rounded, well-opinionated answer for which card is going to be best for your hard-earned money. And again, each of these cards that you see in this video will be linked down in the description if you want to check them out and purchase them for your next gaming PC or as an upgrade for your current one. So if you like these sort of value analysis videos on PC gaming hardware, then definitely subscribe to the Scatterworld channel. This weekend, on Sunday, we have a $600 gaming PC build video coming out. It's a full shebang, it's a full thing, it's going to be a really cool video to watch. So definitely subscribe if you want to see that, and press the bell notification button so you don't miss that upload. And again, if you want to help out this video and the algorithm, because it's always changing and always being sporadic and totally unpredictable, then feel free to like the video. That would be much appreciated. But without further ado, let's get into the video. Before I begin, I want to give an honorable mention to the RX 590. It's a graphics card that does meet the criteria for this video since it's about $210 brand new. However, whenever you look at the GTX 1660, which is only $10 more, it just simply beats it on all terms on performance and value. So for that simple metric, I am excluding it out of this video, but I will have it linked below if you want to check that card if, say, you want a really powerful AMD card for a certain scenario that's the best you can get for under 250 bucks. Anyways, let's go ahead and talk about the 5 specific cards that we're testing. So first, we have the Gigabyte GTX 1660 Overclocked Edition graphics card. This has 6 GB of GDDR5 memory, an 1830 MHz clock speed, and 1408 CUDA cores. For the moment, it's NVIDIA's entry-level mid-range 1080p graphics card, and I think for the price, it's gonna stay here for a long time, so you definitely won't be running out of it if you were to, say, buy it brand new. Next, we have the EVGA GeForce GTX 1650 SC Ultra card. This has 4 GB of GDDR5 memory, an 1860 MHz clock speed, and 896 CUDA cores. And this is NVIDIA's only brand new Turing-based GTX card that is below $200. And also, it is the cheapest graphics card on this list for being brand new. Then next up, we have the Gigabyte GTX 1060 Extreme Gaming Edition card, which has 6 GB of GDDR5 memory, a 1620 MHz clock speed, and 12,080 CUDA cores. Now, this is the only graphics card on this list that at the moment you can get mostly readily used. You can't really get it brand new, but I am so confident that you will run out of this card on a used market, because it is the #1 most popular graphics card based off of Steam. So I have no doubt that there's going to be no shortage of GTX 1060s on eBay, Letgo, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, you name it, anytime soon. And now for the red team, we have the PowerColor RX 580 Red Devil graphics card. This has 8 GB of GDDR5 memory, a 1380 MHz clock speed, and 2,304 stream processors. This, I would say, is AMD's most popular graphics card at the moment, and it's pretty well priced as well, and you can get this thing brand new and used. And very similar to the previous card, we have the XFX RX 570. This again has 8GB of GDDR5 memory, a 1286 MHz clock speed, 2048 stream processors, and just like the RX 580 is another very popular choice, and it is less expensive than the previous card we just talked about. So we've got the cards, and now let's go into the benchmarks. So first, I'll be showing you the benchmarks across 5 games, those being Fortnite, CSGO, Rainbow Six Siege, Forza Horizon 4, and GTA 5. So I think maybe aside from Forza Horizon 4, which is my personal favorite PC game, I think those 4 games are going to be really what most of you are going to be looking at in terms of kind of measuring the performance of a card on an actual realistic PC gaming scale. So hopefully that'll give you guys a more realistic view of how good these cards stack up against each other. And one important thing to note is that I've actually got the same scripting in terms of testing for each of these cards, and that does include Fortnite and CSGO, even though they don't have built-in benchmarking tools, because thanks to their community maps and features, I've actually downloaded 2 benchmarking based maps for CSGO and Fortnite, so that way the testing for all the cards on those 2 games will be identical rather than going out into the blue on Battle Royale or Deathmatch and having possible variable results. And one final thing to note is that all of these benchmarks were done at stock speeds. None of these cards were overclocked. So first up, we have GTA 5, and this is running at high settings with FXAA enabled, MSAA 2X enabled, and anti-traffic filtering at 16X. The GTX 1660 is the fastest card out of the bunch, and the RX 570 is the slowest, but again, the GTX 1060 is not too far behind from the 1660, which is something interesting to note considering the generational difference between this Turing and Pascal card. Also, another thing to note is that the GTX 1650 and RX 580 basically have the same result. Next, we got Fortnite, and this is running at competitive settings, so not completely maxed out, which means we're running at a render distance of epic, and we're pretty much rated at low on everything else in the game settings. Though, one thing to note with this benchmarking map is that it's basically throwing everything possible at the graphics card, so the averages for this benchmarking test are considerably lower than what you'll actually get in game. So just keep note of that, but the scripting was the same and we did get some interesting results. So in terms of the data, there's definitely some things off. Why is the GTX 1650, which is probably the slowest card on this list, score as well as the 1660 and even the 1060, right? And at the same time, the RX 570 actually beating the 580 in the benchmarking tool. So the data for Fortnite, from what I found, was really inconclusive, but one thing we can tell is that AMD cards do run worse on Fortnite, and this is because Fortnite is using the Unreal Engine, which is really well optimized for NVIDIA cards. So if you were going to play Fortnite for the rest of your life, then I would look into getting an NVIDIA card. Next up, we have Forza Horizon 4 running at ultra settings, and here we have the RX 580 finally matching up with these NVIDIA cards, matching with the GTX 1060 at 74 frames per second. And notably, the GTX 1650 definitely tanking at 59 frames per second, and the RX 570 for only $10 more, getting 68 frames per second. I think it's important to include this game because it is a Microsoft Studios game, and most of Microsoft's titles coming from Xbox over to PC are more optimized for AMD, so GCN architecture, because the Xbox One is running on an AMD APU basically. So this may be important for those of you who are looking at the Halo Master Chief Collection, because that game is developed by Microsoft Studios, so maybe getting an AMD card for that would be useful according to these results. Next up, we have Rainbow Six Siege running at max settings with TAA anti-aliasing and 100% render resolution, and here the GTX 1660 is pulling ahead, though more interestingly, the RX 580 and RX 570 do put up a good fight for their price. And closing out with CSGO, where the averages were ridiculously high, and again, this is the game running at max settings, so if you were to turn it down to more competitive settings, you could probably get above 240 frames per second on each of these cards. But with the game maxed out, the 1660 is the fastest, and the 1060 is right behind it, despite the generational difference. The 1650 definitely shows that $70 difference, and on top of that, the 580 and 570 are right in the middle. So those are the performance benchmarks, and now let's go into the value benchmarks. So in terms of the graphics cards based off of their brand new prices, so this is going to be excluding the GTX 1060 1660 since you can't get that card brand new. Between the 4 graphics cards on GTA 5, the GTX 1650 actually presented the most value at 0.51 frames per dollar. The lowest was the 580 at 0.42 frames per dollar. And I mean, it's not that far behind, actually behind the 1660 and 570. So really, the 1650 shines in terms of value on this. Now on Fortnite, again, the 1650 shines at 0.61 frames per dollar. But again, that benchmarking tool is, I guess it didn't really produce the best results. So I wouldn't totally take this metric for this game into account. But again, you can see the value difference between AMD and nvidia in this case. But now onto the more stable result, Forza, we can see that the GTX 1660 has the worst at 0.3 frames per dollar, and the RX 570 has the best at 0.43 frames per dollar. And now going over to Rainbow Six Siege, we can see that the RX 580 and RX 570 are tied in terms of value at 0.52 frames per dollar, and the GTX 1660 is the slowest, or actually not the slowest, the worst value at 0.48, which is not that far behind. But now closing out at CSGO, and there is going to be a big difference here, we can see that the 1650 has the best value at 1.4 frames per dollar. And I'm not too surprised by this because the frame rates in the game are obviously really high, and of course there's kind of a point of diminishing returns when it comes to how much you spend on a card and how high of a frames per second you're going to get on a game at like really low settings that's really easy to run. So yeah, the 1650 did score the best in terms of value, but I wouldn't totally judge its value just based off of this game. As you can see, the 1660 was the fastest card, but it had the lowest value rating, which kind of shows that what I was just talking about. But now how about the used market? How would the RX 580 and RX 570 stack up to the GTX 1060 if you're looking at these cards from a used perspective? So this omits the GTX 1660 and GTX 1650. Well, for that, we can see that on GTA 5, again, the used 1060 does come out on top, and I'm not surprised because GTA 5 is a very well optimized game for nvidia cards. Now on Fortnite though, we can see that actually when looking at the new cards in comparison, the RX 570 used for about $125 presents the best value out of the whole entire list, which is good to see. I mean, it's a really low price on eBay, but that's kind of interesting to see from an NVIDIA optimized game. Now moving on to Forza, which is a bit more AMD optimized, we can see that the 580 and 570 do present really good value right there at about 0.53 and 0.54 frames per dollar. And again, the NVIDIA card doesn't quite stack up in terms of value. And then on a use perspective, in terms of Rainbow Six Siege, we can see that the 570 and 580 definitely hold their value, getting at 0.67 frames per dollar compared to the 0.58 on the GTX 1060. And then finally, rounding it out with CSGO, we can see that the RX 570 took the crown in terms of value, and the RX 580 actually held the least value in terms of used prices. So coming to my final thoughts, which card do you think I ultimately recommend for those of you looking at a brand new graphics card? If you're looking at a brand new card, I actually wouldn't stray too far away from one of the new GTX 1600 series of cards, more specifically the GTX 1650. And the only reason why I really recommend this at the time of making this video is because one, the RX 570 and RX 580 are eventually going to be replaced by their Navi counterparts. And on top of that, Ethereum is rising in price again, and RX cards are really popular for mining that cryptocurrency, and the price just in general has risen since the spring, so the RX 580 and 570 on a brand new perspective may not be that worth it to get. So if you're really low on cash, I wouldn't actually disrespect the 1650. It can actually hold its own. But again, if you need more power, I would look into the 1660. And actually, I did get to test one in my upcoming $600 gaming PC, and I overclocked it a ton, and the results were pretty shocking, which you'll just have to wait till Sunday to see what I'm talking about for that. But now, how about a used card? What should you get if you want to have the best value used card that's going to give you the most frames per dollar, along with some really solid 1080p gaming performance? For that, I wouldn't look any farther than actually the RX 570 at 8 GB of VRAM. As we saw from the benchmarks, it wasn't that much slower than the 580, maybe with the exception of Rainbow Six Siege. And on top of that, it takes in way less wattage, and it's a much cooler card, because the TDP on the RX 580 is 185 watts, and the TDP on the 570 is 120. So you're going to be running much cooler on the 570, which I think is a blessing in disguise for you, those of you running on gaming PCs. But if you are going to be more battle royale based in terms of gaming, so if you're going to be running Fortnite or PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, which run on the Unreal Engine, I would actually look at the GTX 1060 because that is a card with some really good value despite being used, especially this used one that I got, which is the Extreme Gaming Edition, which I snagged off of Craigslist for $110. So they're really readily available, so I wouldn't be surprised if you scored a really good deal on one of those. So I would look at the RX 570 8GB card or GTX 1060 card for a used graphics card. So that is it for my top 5 best gaming graphics cards for the summer of 2019. If you enjoyed this video, then definitely like it. And if you enjoy this content, then feel free to subscribe to the Scatterville channel. We're trying to put out 2 videos a week, one on Friday and another on Sunday. And we're going to be moving into a new studio, so the set space is going to look different, but it's going to be a lot cooler. Anyways, that is all that I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. And this is the Scatterville channel, signing out.